Hey everyone! So just a reminder, I will be posting videos or assignments only on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for this class since this is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. So you still have your Tuesdays and Thursdays off. So we're going to start chapter 17, Nations and Empires. And with this dynamic, I don't know how far we will get through this set of notes, but I'm going to try not to talk more than, 15 minutes. We'll see. All right, so Nations and Empires. This is the chapter title. And then our topic for today is nation building in the Americas. And this section looks at the United States, it looks at Mexico and Brazil, and other areas in Latin America. All right, so there are a couple of key themes in this chapter. One of them is that nation-state building and imperial expansion had become really popular to the point where the map of the world looked different. On top of that, you have this trend of industrialization and then science and technology that have allowed states and empowered states to actually overtake other states. So that is where the imperial expansion part comes in. Because of great technology, some nations had better weapons than others and were therefore able to overtake other nations or other territories. Another key theme of this chapter is that the imperialist countries, the ones who were building empires in Europe, the US, Japan, did have lots of opposition. The people that they were trying to take over really didn't go down peacefully, so in many cases there were revolts against this colonial rule. All right, so one of the goals of nation states was to consolidate, to strengthen within, and then to expand globally after that. So once the nation state itself became stable, then they wanted to continue to expand. And basically what that means is that they took over other territories and turned them into colonies to make money off of them. One of the things that made life difficult for these empires is that in several instances, there were massive empires, but there were lots of different ethnicities within. We've talked about the Ottoman Empire before and how they had all sorts of people in the Ottoman Empire, different languages being spoken, different religions being practiced. But if they could celebrate nationalism, then it would unify the people. And so one of the things that is popular during this era is leaders promoting nationalism and encouraging these diverse groups of people to take on common identities. And by common identities, I mean that they were to take pride in their customs, in their culture, in their language, and in their traditions, in their religion. And so obviously not all nation states are created equal. Some vary. In some cases this was successful and it served to unite diverse groups of people. In other cases, like in the Austrian Empire, nationalism actually caused division because different ethnic groups were proud of their national heritage that was not a part of the Austrian Empire. So that caused people there to rebel. All right, so nationalism and imperialism went hand in hand. This nation building and the acquisition of new territory were very much a marriage. Large migrations of people left the mother country and went to the new territories or the new colonies, and to solidify the relationship between the imperial country and the colony. And so in addition to that, it's not just a migration of people, but you have the movement of labor, of capital, of goods to the new territories. So this is looking at some of the common goals that were shared by leaders in the Americas in the 19th century. And so this would be leaders in the United States, in Canada, in Latin American countries as well. One of their primary goals was just to make sure that their communities had political stability. As you've seen throughout history, if a community lacks political stability, that sort of lends itself to rebellion and unrest and uprising. So this is one of the main goals, and some of the ways that they sought to achieve that was, number one, through public participation. This really didn't exist in Great Britain, but allowing people to vote, allowing people to run for office, ensured public buy-in. They also wanted legitimacy. They wanted their government to be viewed as legitimate in the eyes of the people, and even broader than that, they wanted their nation to be viewed as legitimate in the eyes of other nations. They also wanted uniform laws that applied to everyone, and they wanted a court system that was universal across communities. Another thing that they wanted to ensure not only political stability but also economic stability was a standard currency. Using the same money would make it so that trade among the colonies with the mother country would be much easier. All right, so we've already said this, but these nation states wanted to expand. Territorial expansion was necessary to the growth of the nation state. In the eyes of the leaders, it was. And so in the process of expanding, they challenged traditional ways of life. Just think of the example of the United States. As the colonists and the settlers began to expand westward, they encountered indigenous peoples. And more times than not, indigenous peoples were either pushed further westward, they were conquered and defeated, or they were forced to assimilate. Obviously, the method and the process for that differed from country to country, but typically natives were forced to give up their ways in light of the growth of the nation state. All right, in the United States, there was this view in the United States that American expansion, so territorial expansion, pushing out to the west, was necessary for the independence of the United States and also the economic well-being of the citizens. There's this idea of manifest destiny, and this is just the belief that it was God's plan, it was God's destiny for the Americans, for the United States, to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And you kind of see this play out further, the gold rush in California in 1849, hence the 49ers, which in turn led to mass migration to the state of California in the 50s. And then a rush of immigrants after that from all over the world. And there she is. That is Lady Providence leading people westward. And you can see here that this idea of manifest destiny, this idea of territorial expansion, was sort of at the heart of United States culture. All right, so this expansion leads to the Civil War. And the reason why U.S. expansion leads to the Civil War is because of the question of slavery. So as the U.S. expands westward and new territories are set up and new territories become states, the people living there said, hey, are we going to be a slave state or a free state? And people in Congress were worried about the balance being kept in Congress between slave states and free states because they didn't want legislation that would lean one way or the other. And so people don't often think of expansion as a cause of the Civil War, but because of the expansion of slavery, or the questioning the role of slavery in expansion, it actually was a direct cause of the Civil War. This conflict, the Civil War, obviously leads to the end of slavery in the United States. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, which the South was forced to ratify all of those after the war was over to try to bring Reconstruction to an end, freed the slaves, it made the former slaves citizens, and it gave them the right to vote as citizens. So that's the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Interestingly, once the Civil War is over, keeping in mind most of the fighting was done in the South, and so the South was kind of ravaged after the Civil War. There was lots of destruction, lots of damage to property. to farms, loss of life, money, currency was almost worthless in the South. But after this war is over, the national government, the U.S. national government, begins to strengthen, and actually the U.S. begins to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of industrial development. And so one of the things we see after the Civil War is over is that the U.S. dramatically grows economically after this war. And like I said, this is pretty much when they begin the race to the top. And before long, they have surpassed Great Britain in terms of industrial development. 200,000 miles of railroad track being laid by 1900. And so just dramatic growth after the Civil War. So the United States becomes a global power as a result of this. Like I said, they surpass Great Britain, they surpass Germany as they begin to rise to the top. One of the, downsides of the United States becoming a global power and becoming more industrialized is the fact that this new economy was prone to overproduction and depression. Because they now had technology and machines to do a lot of the manufacturing, they were prone to overproduction, which it sounds like a good problem to have too much of a product. But as you know, if you have too much of a product and not enough buyers, the price of that product goes down and it hurts the manufacturer. And so that problem of overproduction actually leads to the problem of economic depression. And so you also see class conflict emerge because 1% of the Americans controlled 90% of the wealth. And so you have this battle emerge between, or not an actual battle, but like a social battle emerge between rich and poor. And as a result of that, in some instances, you have radical leaders that emerge, not as radical as they were in Europe, not as many people promoting Marxism or socialism. But there are some people in the United States during this time who looked at the unfairness of 1% of the people owning 90% of the wealth, and it leads these people to protest against this new economy. And so not only that, you have farmers protesting in the South, sharecroppers protesting for cheaper loans, rapid industrialization, and in some cases socialism, where, of course, the government takes over the major industries in the United States. So we're actually at a good stopping point. I will remind you at this point to make sure that you send me a picture of the notes that you have taken. You can send them to my email, justin.hall@fcspatriots.com. All right, until Monday, I will see you later.